I would like to take my MG to the Good Guys show tomorrow, but I noticed last time I took it out that my heater control valve started leaking. It's been dripping all over the distributor, so I don't want to go to the show like that. So we need to fix that. Now, me being me, my heater control valve has been modified. It's been modified first to get slightly better flow through it, but also to take extra weight out of it, because, well, that's just me and my car. Once I lost a trophy position auto crossing one time by, I think it was 6/1000ths of a second, I realized that under the rules I really can't get more horsepower, and I couldn't really afford better tires, so I started shaving weight. Now sometimes something like that may only save, half an ounce tops, whatever, but when you do enough of those things, which, like you see, I drilled my hinges here, my alternator mount here has been cut here, plus dozens of other little things all around the car. Sometimes they don't saving way more than just a half an ounce, but some of the things I did was I made aluminum plate here. I've made an aluminum core support. I did an aluminum front plate on the engine that I made, and then actually before I did the transmission conversion, I had made an aluminum rear plate for it, but then the transmission conversion came with aluminum plate, and then that the 5-speed Datsun transmission weighs less than the 4-speed overdrive I took out, and has much better gear spacing, which also works better for auto crossing. So when you add up all those little things, you do enough of those things, that's how this car comes in at 2,100 pounds without the ballast that I have in there to balance the car out. And that's 2,100 pounds with retaining the heater, which I have to retain for the class I'm running in, all the factory glass, and I still have all the factory seats in it. So replacing a heater control valve is actually a fairly simple, quick job, but we first have to start out with draining the antifreeze. So I'll get that drained and then we'll get back to it. Alright, so now we just need to take the valve itself actually off the car. And it's easier just to get the plug wires out of the way. Now, in my case on this car, when I put the engine in, I never actually hooked the cable back up. So that's one thing we don't have to do here, which is a little cable clamp here, which it takes 2 wrenches to take loose, and then a screw here to take all that off. So now I found I have one 7/16 wrench in my toolbox that is kind of a short wrench, but the boxed end here is thinner than all the other wrenches in my box. That makes it perfect for doing the heater control valve, because if this is too thick, you can't actually get it in there and get on the bolt. So we start out by just taking the hose clamp off. Yeah, I forgot I had the heater valve closed. You should have the heater valve open while draining the coolant out of it, so that you get the coolant out of the the heater, so that when you go to take the valve off, it's not just dumping coolant everywhere. So I'll have to wait another minute for that to finish draining. And then at this point, it's a simple matter of just taking these 2 bolts out. But it's not so simple because that bottom one's really tough to get to. If you use a really long wrench, you'll never get the bottom one loose. Now I found once you get the bottom loose, you just twist this around. Let me get that out of the way. And then it makes it a lot easier to get that loose. Now, depending on how well the gasket's stuck or how much sealant somebody's put in, it may not go that smooth. You may have to loosen this a little further and then, get it to pop loose before you can turn it. And now we just take that bolt out and get it out of here. So we'll go ahead and take a quick look on the bench at the heater control valve and how it works, and probably show you what I modified on it myself. But I'll probably end up just throwing a stock one back on it to get it running because I don't want to put that much time into it today. So this is the heater control valve as used on the MGB and actually many other British cars of the time period. But the lower part of the housing was different on some of them, but the basic top portion of it remained the same on many of the cars. So we've got a rivet right here. You drill out that rivet and you can take it apart. All right, so now I've drilled out that rivet, which is just a basic 1/8 inch rivet. And all you gotta do, now it's a good idea to go ahead and take note of the positioning of in relationship to the outlet. Because not on MGBs they'll always be in this position, but other cars they may not be. So then you just twist it and it comes apart. So this is how it works. You got this plunger that goes in and out. So when it's on this seat here, it's closed off, shutting off the flow of water. And then as this turns out, it pulls this up away from that seat and allows water to flow. And now how far away from that seat it is will determine how much water flows. Now in the case of mine, I've actually modified this thing, partly to take weight out of it, even though it's not going to be much, but also partly to increase the amount of flow through it. Now, of course, the flow is limited by that size hole, but I did drill this out a little bit, mainly because I was taking weight out. But the big thing that I did was up in this part here. Was underneath all of this, I've actually shimmed this here so that when you pull it open, so it would pull it further off the seat, but when it's closed, would still actually shut it off. So there's a fine line there of how many shims you can put underneath there and still have it closed off completely. But putting some underneath there allows us to pull further out, making that opening just a little bigger and allowing a little bit more flow through the valve. And what normally happens with these things, why they leak, is this rubber here, somewhere in this diaphragm, gets a crack in it. So then it starts dripping out through here, and it drips, in the case of the MGB, right on your distributor. And if it drips enough, and you're still running points and stuff, it could drown out the distributor, and then you're sitting stuck on the side of the road. Now I'll have to take this apart to see if we can find the crack in here. So there's a little E-clip right there. You pop that E-clip off, and you can pull this whole thing out. So there's a little E-clip. Got that off. And then we can just pull this right on out of here, which I may have a so then this is the diaphragm. So then we got to clean this diaphragm up so that we can look to see where there's a crack in there. Now there are times these can leak just because across here where it makes the seal to the housing and the cover here, it can actually leak past there. But like in my case, as I was cleaning it, I found, see right here, it's starting to, it was splitting. As I was cleaning it, the split just opened up more. So that's the problem with my valve. Now I could actually replace just this portion, put it in that valve and put that one back on my car. But I'm probably just going to throw another one on there for now. And then later on, I'll go through and actually clean this thing up really good and replace all this, or take the new valve and modify it in the same way I modified this one. But I just want to get this thing up and running and going so that I can go to the good guys and be able to autocross. Because as long as that thing's dripping, really can't do either. All right, so now we got our new heater control valve. We're gonna go ahead and put that thing on. And just remember, if you're ordering a new heater control valve, they do not come with the gaskets. You have to get the gaskets separately. So I always use a little bit of a RTV on there because I like to make sure they don't leak. I pretty much do that on anything gasket wise on these cars. So then we're just going to put it back on there basically the same way we took it off. And since I'm putting a brand new one on, the little cable clamp is on the new one, so I don't have to worry about trying to find one of those. Which means all I need is the cable stop, which I know I have at least new ones of those, so that's no problem to be able to hook that back up. Of course, the dipstick's in the way. So then we just need to hook the cable or the hose back up and then the cable. And then I can show you how I can go find me a cable stop and show you how to hook up the cable. All right, so these are cable stops. Now, there have been issues with these recently. But these holes are not necessarily always the right distance from the end here. And then once you get it into the lever, that hole is partially covered up and you can't get the cable through it. Or like I just test fit this one here, and you can tell this one here is from a different batch than this one. Because this one here has a chamfer around the hole and this one doesn't. This one won't work. Can't get the cable through it. But this one here looks like it will. Now the way these things work is the cable on these things are solid cable. They're not a stranded cable. So being a solid cable, they work both as a push and pull both. So the cable goes through the hole and then the screw tightens down onto the cable. But you need to use 2 wrenches, one to hold the stop and the other to tighten the bolt. Now, the new ones actually are metric, not SAE, so you'll have to use 7mm wrenches to tighten it with. Yay for modern manufacturing, huh? All right, so I like to set these things up in the closed position. That way, because most of us are going to drive these things in the summer and we don't want water going through the heater. So we take the heater control valve, or the heater controls in on the dash, and turn that to the off position, which will put the cable into its shortest position. Then you take this and put it all the way up to the closed position. And you got to know where that hole is there. Get that to where it's facing right up towards, and I like to try to make sure the cable is reasonably straight too. These things can get bent up a little bit. Sometimes, you know, because what happens is it gets at a slight angle. As you go through, it's just hitting the other side here. It's not going through the hole. All right, I'm gonna, just to make life a little easier, see, now it goes through. Shouldn't be that way, but you gotta deal with what you got. If they would drill those holes in them things just 10 thousandths further in or 15 thousandths further in, that wouldn't be a problem. So we want to set this up where you want the cable just a little past the clamp there. And then you need to hold this with one wrench while you tighten it with the other. And you got to be careful too, because these new ones, the threads are pretty sloppy on, and you don't want to over tighten them so to where they strip out. Yay for modern manufacturing standards yet again, huh? Oof. I don't even know if that's going to hold. See the quality of what we deal with. It'll be okay. But definitely don't want to crank the snot out of this and over tighten it, because there isn't a lot of thread there. But you need it tight enough, because there's actually quite a bit of pressure to get this off its seat and open it up initially. And sometimes I've had them where I've had to tweak and adjust them just a little bit to where they didn't quite fully lock closed, but they were closing off the flow in order for them to want to open when you try to open them. So then we go and test it. So now it's full in open position. And now it's in the closed position. So all I got to do is refill this with antifreeze. And you want to remember, after you refill this thing with antifreeze and you run it, you want to open the control valve up to allow coolant to circulate through the heater to get all the air out of the system.